It's Money Matters, an NSCC financial literacy podcast situated in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And now here's your host, Matt Curry.
Hello and welcome to Money Matters podcast. I'm your host, Matt Curry. Am I a financial expert? Heck no. But I do know a few things, and I know people who know a few more things, and that's what this podcast is about, connecting all those pieces together. Today's episode of Money Matters podcast, I have a really special guest with us today. I'd like to introduce our listeners to April Hodgeson, who is a fraud and loss prevention specialist with East Coast Credit Union Limited. Welcome, April.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Welcome. As I said, I mentioned that you were from East Coast Credit Union, but can you just tell us a little bit about the credit union and what you do there?
Sure thing. So credit union is very similar to a larger financial institution, such as RBC or TD, except that we are member owned. And so that means that the people who keep their money with us have input into the way that the business is steered. And credit unions are very socially minded. We do a lot of work in the community and invest in the community heavily. In terms of my role with them as the fraud and loss prevention specialist, my day-to-day is looking at alerts for e-transfers or debit card transactions that the system has flagged as potentially risky, or if there's known scam activity with the recipient, that's something that I would look at and then also do some research on. I talk to members who have been scammed or frauded, and so I'm a little bit like a detective in that way, where I, get the story, ask questions, try to find out where things came from and how the fraudster kind of got in to make trouble. So in addition to that, I also work with our insurance company when I need to make a claim on behalf of one of the members. And I also kind of work with our external business partners to keep e-transfers and debit transactions, for instance, running smoothly.
That's a tall order, April. I bet I can only imagine when you're talking to folks in those situations how stressed out they must be.
Yes, it is often a stressful situation because things are changing very quickly, and it's hard to, I can't always figure out, how these things happened.
Yeah, and I think once upon a time, fraud used to be really obvious, but they're getting more and more intelligent over time and kind of harder to detect. So I would imagine your job has also gotten harder over time as a result of that.
It certainly has, and it's a reality for all financial institutions these days. Like they just keep coming, and they just keep finding holes, and it's kind of like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I can imagine. March is Fraud Prevention Month. Knowing that, what are some key things that every person should know when it comes to preventing fraud, especially with banking?
So there's a few things that people can do that will make a big difference in keeping things secure for themselves. And one of those is if your online banking offers you biometric scanning, which is where, it used to be a fingerprint, now it's a face scan. If you have that option to set up for your logins, that is the best practice for keeping people out other than yourself. Another one would be setting up auto deposit. We see it happen quite a bit where bad actors, hackers, get into people's email addresses and deposit e-transfers into their own accounts that were intended for the hacked account. And so, we see people, it's essentially theft, but it just feels a little bit different because it's in your email, right? So if you set up auto deposit, the money goes directly into your account, no passwords, no, confusion or potential for hacking.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. And when you mentioned face recognition, do you mean like Face ID, for example, with Apple iPhone,
I
or is it
surely
something
do.
else? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So the same way that, I pick up my phone and it looks at my face to open it, my online banking is set up to also look at my face instead of requiring that extra step of verification. It
Right.
looks at my
Right.
face instead.
In the past while, I've heard about situations where people have gotten themselves into, challenging situations where, like, a bank has called them. Do you have any tips around, like, what to say if the bank calls you? Does the bank call you? Like, I hear such mixed messaging about that.
Certainly. So the way that we approach it is that we do now reach out to members to verify things. However, we are never going to ask you for your card number, your personal information like your social insurance number. We're calling you. We're not going to ask you for that. But best practice is to just say, I'm not sure that this call is legitimate. I'm going to call you back via the contact center or local branch or whatever that looks like to confirm first, and then we can talk. And every single person on the financial institution side understands and respects that.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's a popular one that I hear lots of things about. Um, any other tips when it comes to fraud that you think our listeners might want to keep in mind?
Yeah, I have a couple. One of them would be if you have the opportunity to set up notifications for transactions, whether that's on your credit card or your banking, you can often set it up either to notify you via email or via text when there's a transaction that comes up. And so sometimes that is the best way to prevent things because you can get on it right away and contact your bank.
That's a great tip because I would assume that those situations it's best if you can be as proactive as you can because I'm sure timeliness is a factor.
Absolutely, it is. And then the last one would be in terms of things that you can do. An easy one or not, depending on how you look at it, but try not to store your credit card numbers in your online shopping accounts. Any place that you put your credit card number or your debit, MasterCard or Visa debit, whatever it is you have, anywhere that you leave that information, they still have it. And if you were hacked, if they were hacked, like there's so many ways that your information can be exposed. So it's a best thing to do to not store your information.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I know I see that prompt all the time when I'm shopping that the default is to save it. And it's tempting because, it's can be a hassle to go look for your card and put the number in. But I think that's a really great tip just for extra measure to just not have that information so readily available. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And
Yeah.
even something that I have started doing is if there's an option to use Apple Pay or
Tap?
PayPal, if there's an
Oh,
option to
PayPal,
use
yes.
PayPal,
Yeah.
that is an additional layer of verification and authentication for you. So like you've already vetted yourself with PayPal or Apple Pay or Google Pay. And
Right.
so that gives us just an extra kind of security block.
Okay, April, I will end the podcast with the same question that I ask every guest. I'll ask you to put yourself back in the shoes that you wore when you were a student once upon a time. And if you could share a tip with your former student self, what would it be?
Number one for me would be stop ordering takeout.
Mm, good one.
It's junk for your brain and it empties your wallet.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, kind of my number one. But the other thing that I wanted to kind of mention and suggest was in the episode that you did with Lexi Lynn for coffee, she talked about investing your money and the benefit that you can reap over time. I would highly recommend putting effort into learning about that because it's so much better to have your money work for you than for you to have to work for your money.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're a listener and you've picked up that tip. That's great. April, thank you so much for your time and for dropping by today. Really, really helpful information that you shared.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Money Matters with Matt. I hope you learned something new. If you've got an idea for a topic for a future episode, drop us an email at awards@nscc.ca. You can also send us a question there and we will answer it in a future episode. Any resources or links that we discussed during this episode are available in the show notes. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Money Matters, an NSCC financial literacy podcast. Make sure to subscribe to NSCC's YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. Until next time.